it's been incredible to see the growth in software companies, data management, data storage, AI, you name it, on our exhibit floors at both the Europe Conference and the International Conference.
That was Vicki Loise, CEO of SLAS, the Society for Laboratory Automation and Screening. SLAS is a global scientific society serving almost 20,000 researchers, scientists, and industry professionals working at the intersection of life sciences and technology. With a mission rooted in advancing laboratory innovation, SLAS connects its community through world-class conferences, open access publication, hands-on education, and expanding global presence spanning Europe. From its flagship international conference to its growing European events, topical interest groups, and the newly launched Thrive in Science initiative, SLAS is building the infrastructure for the next generation of scientific collaboration. Welcome to the Biotech Stack, where we explore the cutting-edge technology fueling the future of scientific and healthcare discoveries. From next-generation lab automation and AI-driven drug discovery to breakthrough biomanufacturing and research tools, we dive deep into the innovations transforming health, food, energy, and the businesses behind them. I'm Corinne Regan, your host, and in today's episode, I'm joined by Vicki Loise, CEO of SLAS. Vicki shares her journey leading science-based associations for over 3 decades, and how that experience shapes her vision for SLAS today. We discuss the organization's expanding global footprint, new hands-on education programs, and how the SLAS community is navigating the growing role of AI and data management in lab automation. Let's get started. So Vicki, I'm so grateful that you were able to join us today. I'd love to learn a little bit about yourself and maybe your background before we dive right into learning a little bit more about SLAS itself.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good. I started with SLAS in January of 2017, and I am a career association management person. I started my career working for associations in 1991, and that's where I've always done my work. And it's a great place to be. I love this work. Ironically, even though I don't have a scientific background, the majority of the associations I've worked for are somehow science based. I started off working for the American Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons,
Okay.
and all of these are based here in the Chicago area. The only association that I worked for that was not science based was the National PTA,
Okay.
obviously very education based. And then after National PTA, I spent some time working for an association management company where we managed small to mid-size organizations who could take advantage of the economies of scale of an association management company. So, when you're a smaller association, you probably don't need a full-time accountant, so you can buy a a quarter of a time of an accountant, so to speak. And I was an executive director or CEO for a lot of scientific based organizations, those working in research, psychosocial issues, healthcare, medical, and so on. And eventually became a vice president in that company and did more work in strategic growth for the clients themselves,
Okay.
as well as for the company. And then from there is when I came to SLAS in 2017.
So what brought you to SLAS in 2017?
Uh, you know, it was very interesting position opening up when I think back on um, the interview process and what they were asking about and what they were looking for. SLAS at the time, and still does, have an incredible international conference that it really has built its reputation on. And one of the things that the board and the search committee and the association was looking for was someone who understood the value of that type of an event and made sure that it would remain relevant. It's great when you are the lab automation event to come to, but you have to maintain that spot, and maintaining that spot takes a lot of very conscious effort and work and strategic work. instead of, you can't just sort of rest on your laurels and assume that everybody is just going to show up every year. So it was really important to the board to make sure that they had someone who understood that and could work creatively in making sure that that conference did remain relevant and evolved while also maintaining the core of the organization. So that's always a fun challenge to dive into. The other thing that SLAS was embarking on at the time was its European growth strategy. They had already had an advisory council and had done some research around what they needed to do as an organization to have a presence in Europe. And they had had a few smaller, very single topic symposia, deep dive into a single topic um, in Europe, and were going to have their first Europe conference the year after I started. So they needed somebody who understood that growth philosophy outside of the United States, which I also had had some experience with, and I actually really, really enjoy doing. It's a very fun challenge to take off that typical American Association hat and put on one where you have to think about how the needs and the cultures are different of wherever you're going to and make sure you're there to meet that versus them meeting you, because that won't happen. So that was a really fun challenge. And then putting a little more focus around membership growth and some really strategic resources behind membership growth and understanding the difference between membership growth and community growth. And we have both of those. And that, um, those two things have to work very complementary with each other. Those efforts have to be complementary to each other without one cannibalizing the other. So those were some of the main things that was what they were looking for when I applied for this position, and they were the things that I found most interesting.
Hearing more about the expansion and the strategic approach to how to keep it relevant, but also grow this automation conference space. But SLAS is more than conferences,
Hmm.
is my understanding. It
Yeah,
is more than just something that happens in Boston and San Diego now every other year. And now you have this approach in Europe. But it looks like there are some, what I want to say is satellite style, smaller pop-up conferences that are happening. And then of course I'll dive into this a little more as a bigger question, is something called the Thrive in Science, which sounds like it was launched this year as well. Do you mind diving into more details on some of more the overarching part of SLAS?
sure, sure. So you're 100% correct. We do have smaller events throughout the year. We do have right now one symposia running that is our sample management symposia. That'll take place later this year in San Francisco, and then that rotates between the US and Europe. So it'll go back to Europe in 27. But we also hold meetups both in Europe and the US. And these we've been doing for a few years. These are purely networking events. They're very low key, easy things to participate in. They're free. They're usually, take place late afternoon, early evening. There will be a scientific presenter who will talk on something for about 30 or 40 minutes and take some questions. It's not like your typical scientific presentation with 45 slides. This is kind of just getting at the surface of a particular topic. And
Okay.
then afterwards is networking, at apero, as they say in Europe. And it gives everybody a chance to have that conversation about whatever they just heard or what they're working on, where are you from. And it's very much meant to be an individual's opportunity to sort of introduce themselves to SLAS and find out who we are, who our community is, and if this is a home for them. So that, like I said, those take place in Europe and the US both. And then we also had launched last year a new education event called our Liquid Handling Skills Bootcamp. And this
Okay.
takes place at Carnegie Mellon University. And this is our only hands on skills building education offering. So there is some lecture time that takes place, and then they go into the lab and play with the equipment based on what they just learned. And it's a day and a half event. That was launched a year ago. And we expect that that is going to expand, hopefully expand that into Europe as well, and probably start developing some boot camps on different topics than just liquid handling skills.
Can you share at this point what some of those additional education opportunities might be? By chance, is
If
there
I had
AI
him, I
in there?
would. If I had him,
Okay,
I would. Yeah,
okay.
it's really early days for that. And I know that there's a whole, we're in the process of diving into our new version of our strategic plan, which is also sending us into a new version of our education plan, and that will be part of it. So as soon as we have some topics that we're kind of ruminating on, I would be happy to share them.
Okay, that's great. It was something for us to keep an eye out for.
Yeah.
So, in addition to these educational opportunities where there's this hands on approach, there are other educational opportunities that might be virtual. You also have access to publications for members, and
Mhm.
then there's additional member offerings within just being a member of the SLAS organization. Can you dive into those a little bit more in detail?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, in the area of publications, we have two open access journals, SLAS Discovery and SLAS Technology. 100% full open access for folks to publish. And then from an online perspective, we have what we call our technology idea exchange or ties. And those, again, are 30 to 40-minute online discussions on a particular technology topic. It's usually led by somebody who will present a concept that they have had success with, or maybe even a challenge that they're having to deal with. And it's an open discussion on ideas to solve that challenge. Again, very informal, free to attend, and those take place about every other month that those happen. You can find all of these on our website. There is a group for just about everything. And if you have a particular area of science that you're really interested in, you can join that TIG. And they meet online. They also meet in person. Some of them meet in person at our international conference. And then access, when you're from a membership standpoint, access to those TIGs and our online connected group for members is broader than for non-members. So our online connected group is kind of like a LinkedIn for SLAS. There are lots of different special topic groups in there that you can pose questions to. There are regional groups in there that you can chat with and have some discussions on what's going on in your neck of the woods. So that's available as well. And then, of course, any of those things that have a fee, members obviously get a discount for.
What is the difference between being a member of SLAS and a non member? It sounds like there's still access to some of this information as a non member, maybe just not all of it.
Yeah, exactly. So really, the biggest difference ends up being a price point.
Okay.
We give access to non-members to just about everything we have. It's just that it's going to come at a different price point than for members. But this is one of the things that is part of that community membership philosophy. And a lot of it comes from being an international organization. Um, Outside of the United States, it may not be typical or part of one's culture to join an organization, to pay dues and join. Depending on where you are, that could be a really foreign concept and just not something that's embraced. So, we do think of ourselves as having this much broader community that are individuals who come and engage with us in some meaningful way. And that's great. We love that. And if joining, being a dues paying member is not ever your thing, that's okay too. You know, we're going to make sure that there are still resources there for those folks and also make sure that they feel like this is their home, that they have a place here within the broader SLAS community and we can find that niche for them that is best for them.
Touching a little bit more on the international approach, obviously you've expanded into Europe because that was the next stage of growing the community. With Asia growing in popularity, especially in the pharma biopharma space, is there strategic initiatives where we could possibly grow into something in China or Japan, or
Hmm.
not yet?
Oh, no, absolutely. So Asia, and Asia growth strategy is something that we have been talking about as an organization very recently. And doing that in Asia is a very, very different endeavor than Europe, and almost has to be individualized by country, um, for a number of reasons. So I do think we're going to start dipping our toe in some regions in Asia, possibly Japan, possibly India, or Singapore to start. And each one of those would have a different effort behind it. That said, I wouldn't expect to see an SLAS Asia conference right away, or maybe not even for quite some time. Embarking on something like that too, it takes a much different effort than what we've done in Europe and in the United States.
Going back to a little bit more about the SLAS community, I know this was before your time, but SLAS started out in an effort to really support the automation and the screening communities. We're starting to see a lot more AI. There's a lot more digital companies that are out there, execution platforms. I'd love to learn a
Mhm.
little bit more about how this is, helping the SLA community navigate this additional space.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with that. We see, it's been incredible to see the growth in software companies, data management, data storage, AI, you name it, on our exhibit floors at both the Europe conference and the international conference. And I think that our members are getting to that point where they are starting to wrap their heads around how they want to use AI in automation. What is the best way to utilize that tool, but also how they manage all the data, and how where is the best place for AI in that data management scope as well. Um, we actually held some AI symposia. Um, I think five different iterations we did with it, and they were both on AI and data management. Um, this was a few years ago, and they just didn't have the kind of response that we thought they would have, especially compared to some of the other topics that we offer. And we think part of it was we were a little too early in that. What we were seeing was there just wasn't a definitive strategy yet behind how folks wanted to use AI. They hadn't wrapped their heads around it, their companies hadn't. And I think we're past that. I actually think, based on some of the things that I'm seeing and hearing in the industry, it sounds like that's starting to formulate into something that's a little less squishy, something
Okay,
that they can
right.
kind of get their hands on. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So do you think you will re-engage in some more of these AI data execution, sample management software platform symposiums again as it has become more of a sticky concept in the industry?
Yeah, it sure has. And, we already do have AI tracks within our international conference. And then at the Europe conference, we do also some diagonal tracks, and we talk about where there is AI happening within that programming. As it becomes more defined of what the need is in the community, I can see us possibly looking at some more focused content in that space.
Speaking about more programs that SLAS participates and produces, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Thrive in Science, the Women's Leadership Forum. I believe it was launched this year in
Mhm.
Boston. I had a great opportunity to talk to the president of ReadySoft, Elizabeth. She was part of some of the volunteer planning for this program. As a woman in science, I find this to be super valuable, and I just wanted to hear your take on it. How did it go? What's the future of the program? All the details.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It did launch for the first time in Boston right after the international conference this year. We were really, really pleased with the first iteration of this event. There were about 90 people registered in attendance, and we had some great keynote speakers. There were some great discussions that went on. Um, the thing that I always love the most is just watching the networking and conversations that happen in the hallway. Actually, I can't give out too much details, but was standing there listening to a conversation between two women who work for major pharma companies who have some pretty high positions within their companies and their departments, talking about how their companies could collaborate on a particular challenge they were both having with a technology provider. And just that moment of hearing two women saying, "Oh yeah, we let's fix this problem together. Like we would absolutely want to work with you, and let's make this easy for all of us." Was made for me the whole week, and certainly the highlight for me of that event. Thrive in Science is going to continue. It is the We intentionally held it as part of the international conference in its first iteration, to get us to get make it as easy for folks as possible to attend. So, assuming they were already coming to the conference, if they could add on a day, and attend that, we wanted to make that as easy as possible. I see this as something that will grow significantly, and once it gets to that point, it could be a standalone event and happen at some other point during the year. So we're all in behind Thrive in Science. We have evaluations out right now, and so we'll see how the attendees responded to it. But I know that everybody was really pleased that we started this and pleased with the concept for it. And there were a ton of great ideas for how to help it grow and improve next year.
So, on that same topic, as we continue through 2026, where can we see some of these SLAS events throughout the next calendar year?
Sure. Well, next week we're going to be in Lyon, France, having a meetup in Lyon right before Forum Labo, which is also taking place in Lyon. Our meetup is going to be on March 9th. And then we will be we're holding another meetup April 30th in Basel. And that takes place right before Swiss Biotech Days. So if you're going to either one of those events, go to our website, slas.org, and check out those two meetups. Like I said, they're free to attend. We just need you to register so we know you're coming. And you get a chance to meet some folks from SLAS. So those would be the first two. Then our Europe conference will be in Vienna, May 19th through the 21st. Um, Come back to the US and we'll be holding a meetup in Chicago in June. Take a little time off over the summer. Oh, I'm sorry. No, well, our Workforce Accelerator is also in June at Carnegie Mellon. Then we're going to take a couple of months off, and we'll be back to doing meetups at the end of September in Leiden, the Netherlands. We will have a meetup in Tübingen, Germany in the middle of October, and the Sample Management Symposium will also take place the middle of October in San Francisco. And then we're going to finish the year with our joint meetup that we do with LRIG in London, as part of London Bioinnovation Week. And our meetup will be on December 9th.
Okay, great. So lots of opportunities in different areas of the SLAS community to find
Yeah,
you and get some support throughout the year.
absolutely. Yep.
So one final question I'd love to ask is, because SLAS has really evolved over the last at least 20 years, where would you see SLAS maybe over the next 5 years as our community continues to evolve in this space?
I think it's going to be all about AI. That you brought this up earlier. That has been a hot topic for a while, and as the community is getting better and better at figuring out the best ways to apply it, that's where I think you're going to see sort of an evolution happening in the work that people are doing who come to our events or who are joining the organization. You're going to see more data managers, more engineers, more of those folks who are responsible for understanding how best to utilize that tool and how it applies to the science.
We'd like to thank our guest, Vicki Loise, CEO of SLAS, for joining us on the Biotech Stack. For more information on Vicki or SLAS, please check the links in our show notes below. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.